Hi, this is Kurt Farnham coming to you from New York City with some musings on Twin Peaks: The Return, Psycho, and The Shining. There's a lot going on in common with these three. I'm only going to touch on a couple of things in this short segment, and I was inspired to do this after seeing the new documentary on Psycho, 7852. This documentary does a deep dive into the shower scene in Psycho, which I thought the whole thing was okay, but a couple things jumped out at me just having finished Twin Peaks: The Return. A lot of discussion about Hitchcock as it related to Twin Peaks, but it was mostly centered around Judy, and there were some really fascinating theories about the parallels between these two works. But what jumped out at me was the concept of mother. Mother is something dangerous and threatening. Poor Laura, man, this chick can't catch a break. She had to deal with Leland in life, and now in her afterlife, or wherever she is, she's dealing with what her mother, Sarah, has turned into, which is never fully explained. There's lots of theories about it. And Sarah was always a character more or less cast as the grieving mother and widow eventually. And nothing really supernatural goes on with her until season 2, and she has this unusual scene where she gives this message to Major Briggs in the diner, and she's clearly speaking in a voice that is not her own. So not much more, if anything, is said about this to my recollection. But they really elaborate on this in season 3. Some of the best scenes in season 3, in my opinion, involve Sarah. Her meltdown in the grocery store over the turkey jerky, the removal of her face in the bar and subsequently ripping that guy's neck out, and most disturbingly, that scene where she attacks Laura's prom picture with the broken vodka bottle. I thought this was the most troubling scene in the series. There's something very unnerving about the concept that you're not safe with your immediate family and that your mother is trying to do you harm. And this is the tie into Psycho, obviously. Hitchcock went full throttle on this with the concept of, mother as murderer, mother as psychotic, someone dangerous. And what they explained in the documentary was this was very deliberate. It was 1960 when this was made, and this is meant to be a subversion of everything that American culture had just been through in the 50s, which was this idea of mom is wholesome and mom is safe. Father knows best, leave it to Beaver, with these super nurturing, loving moms, and then to see someone in a film like Psycho, very different. It was very unnerving. And you see this concept of mother in Twin Peaks, whether it's The Experiment or Judy. She's all over, and she's very threatening. At the end, she really proves to be the villain of the piece, much more so than Bob. Bob is dispatched rather easily. She's in the final scene. Laura hears the sound of her mother's voice, and this is what sends her into meltdown mode. She's pulled out of her safe space in Odessa, hears her mother calling her, and has her meltdown. It's a very disturbing concept, and I always felt for Laura because I kind of wanted her to achieve peace. And it's something she certainly did not get in life or in the series. A couple other little interesting things in Psycho that related to Twin Peaks, that fantastic clip at the end with Norman and his face being superimposed over the corpse of his dead mother. Of course, this reminded me of the scene, relatively easy to miss, but there was a lot of talk about it after, where Sarah's face was superimposed over the jumping man. Also, the house, the Bates house, and how ominous it felt perched up there on the hill. And I'm now seeing the Palmer house in the same way. Notice you're looking up at both of these homes, and it adds to the sense of menace and what's going on inside. And then, of course, wrapped in plastic, Norman murders Marion, and he wraps her in a clear plastic shower curtain. And I can't help but think that consciously or subconsciously, Lynch wasn't thinking of this when he wrapped Laura in plastic in the original series. Something else that they brought up, and I've never heard this, I thought it was actually really interesting, was the wallpaper. And that while Norman is murdering Marion, there's this floral wallpaper in the back. And they said, yeah, ever since the Psycho, directors have been trying to recreate that wallpaper, which they didn't really go into detail about it. But then when they started showing these clips from The Shining, I was like, okay, that's actually true. And The Shining's interesting. There's so much in there with like pattern and print and the rugs. I'm sure there's a thesis to be written about all of this. And what it led me to, and they don't mention this in the documentary, was the wallpaper in Fire Walk with Me, in Laura's painting, when she goes into her dream. And again, I hadn't really made this connection. If anybody's heard or read anything, I'd be really curious to know about it. If you can send me some information or some links, please leave it in the comments section. And then the only other time I caught it was in the girl's bedroom with the frog bug. And again, kind of this return to the theme of the 1950s as being somewhere safe, somewhere innocent. You know, the 50s is so idealized in American culture, and both Hitchcock and Lynch really subvert what we're seeing here. It's not such an innocent time after all. We lost our innocence after we detonated the nuclear bomb. That was the message of Twin Peaks: The Return, and we unleashed something very evil and sinister on American culture, and it literally infects this innocent girl by crawling into her mouth. The other really interesting documentary, if you guys have not seen this, is Room 237. It's been around for a while. It's about The Shining and all the various meanings of The Shining. That on the surface, yes, it was the Stephen King story, but underneath, Kubrick was telling something very different. Some people theorize it was about the Holocaust or the genocide of the American Indian. But there were some themes that I thought that related to Psycho, primarily the idea of this dysfunctional family. Again, similar to the Palmers, you have an only child who is being menaced by a family member. It's not mother in this case, it's dad. Very different story, but you know, this same idea of feeling uneasy about people within your immediate family doing harm to you, especially to someone who's a minor. It's just a disturbing thought and a tricky place to be, especially with the sense of isolation in this film. You feel for Danny as you do for Laura, and both of these characters have visions. Danny, most notably the twins, and Laura, the Chalfonts, Tremonts. I really enjoyed looking at these three films together. Again, there's hours of analysis that could be done. These were just my initial thoughts. The thing I think I like most about The Return is all of the tie-ins and really the endless amount of analysis we can do about this. I loved the way Lynch told a story not relying on writing, with all due respect to Mark Frost, but it was really about visuals and imagery, and I think that is also a tie-in with Hitchcock and Kubrick, who created some of the most memorable, startling images in film history. So I hope there's a season 4, because even though we could chew on season 3 for years, I'd love to see a continuation of the story. And if anybody has links or clips or comments about tie-in with The Shining, something I missed, especially that bit about the wallpaper, which is really stuck in my brain, please leave me a comment, and I will see you at the curtain call.